Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones. Today is a sensitive and yet deeply moving story of death as a way of reclaiming ancient wisdom. And I'll introduce it more fully in a moment, but what stood out to me and what keeps standing out to me over and over again is just how needed sisterhood and community is in these days particularly. This episode reminded me of that even more so. So with that in mind, I would love to invite you into our Secret Witches Apothecary membership, which is our beautiful community where you can learn how to heal yourself, unlock your magic and heal others, where all parts of you are welcome. If you'd love to join us, it's as accessible as it can be. I've intentionally made it so. So head over to nicolebarton.co.uk/membership and you can read more there. There's all the information there. If you are the type of person who is looking for the too long don't read short version link, there is a link to that too at the top of the page if you prefer a shorter read. In the meantime though, let's dive in. On The Secret Witch Show today, our guest is Siân Marie Pilkington, who has been on the show 3 times now. Siân is just gorgeous. She's the wild mama who has raised her babies and landed shakti-based goddess devoted and in service to the taboos of blood, birth, sexuality and death. A queer celt, Magdalene, a radical birth worker, a herbalist and ceremonialist, she guides femmes back to the Great Mother, blending primal intelligence with embodied earth-honouring magic. Siân now works purposefully to decolonize the rites of passage we have been taught to fear, reclaiming birth, postpartum, eros and endings as sacred. Mentoring doulas and space holders in altered states, ecstatic birth, and collaborative community care, her work is a love letter to those ready to remember, rewild and bring initiations home. In this beautiful episode about death, we explored Siân's sacred and unique perspective around miscarriage as a natural, ancient healing rite of passage, rather than the taboo, over-clinicalised, sanitised, dissociative experience it can be created as by our world. Sharing the healing transformation she was able to reclaim from her own miscarriage and the ancient wisdom passed down from her elders, Siân shines a light on the interconnectedness of grief and initiation and the role of ritual and ceremony in alchemy. Providing practical advice on holistic practices, herbs and remedies to support healing, she illuminates the powerful remedy that can be found for us all in learning how to see and hear ourselves and share our stories, touching on shame, rage and grief, and how the witch can help heal the societal avoidance of death and grief. Let's dive in. Welcome, Siân. Welcome back, should I say, for the third time? I think it's the third time. I'm so delighted to welcome you back and to talk about such a sacred topic as well. And one that was very much requested by our community as well. So I know you're just going to hold so much beautiful nurturing space for this, and yet bring also that kind of wild rawness and that beautiful poetic truth to this topic. And you're one of my favorite guests, of course. You for all time, so my heart's really full to be having this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. One of my favorite podcasts. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Well, I was just sharing before we pressed record that kind of the big part of the work that I do now is seeing that women's stories are in effect like remedies for other women. We're all archetypal remedies for each other. So my first invitation is
if you'd like to share a little bit about your own journey, especially if there's anything particularly around miscarriage and how you came to see it as a kind of healing rite of passage, or there is another way that you spoke to it as well. So feel free to bring that in. I'm excited to hear about that.
Oh, we're gonna get straight in, are we? So, I think I've shared a couple of times now my experience with getting into birth and how that began with me having really kind of incredible, fast, mind-blowing, heart explosive experiences. And a lot of that was born on the back of naivety, I think. I didn't really have a lot of voices that were interfering with my process. And so I started my journey as a mother quite young when I was 22, pregnant, 23, birthing. And birth was just something that really just happened to me. And I kind of had that conversation with my mum prior to birthing for the first time. My mum had said to me, like, there was nothing really sacred about birth, the way that she spoke about it. No, my nana is just kind of like the baby came and that was what it was. And it was fast and it was pretty easy and it was painful, but it was pretty simple and straightforward. So my kind of vernacular, my narrative around birth of all kinds has always stemmed from this kind of ancestral idea that birth is, it's just very normalized. It's just very basic and simple. It missed out all of the sacred aspects that I kind of picked up along the way that had been missed out in society and our culture. So when, after I'd had my second baby in 2010, at that point I had almost a 4-year-old and an Esme. When Esme was a year old, in 2011, I hadn't had a period yet. And I was driving home from camping one day and something something just washed over me. I remember exactly where I was in the road and it was telling me that I was pregnant. And I was like, what? Like, why would I have no way to really know this without testing? I haven't got a period back or anything. And I just went and got a pregnancy test and I did it actually in the grocery store. And it came up very fast that I was pregnant with my third baby. And I was really excited and really shocked all at once and realized that I'd been fertile and hadn't really known it. And I trusted that there was a reason why I'd gotten pregnant without a lot of like thought or planning. And the course of that pregnancy was that I never really felt pregnant. I was kind of waiting for the upswing, the uptake of the drop down in altered state. I didn't have the language for that then, but what I recognized was prior in my other pregnancies, I'd had a drop into an altered state of consciousness at the first part of pregnancy. And I was kind of like really teetering on the edge all the time. I was just in and out and in and out, but not really dropping in fully. And I was on a little vacation. It was the middle of the summer or late summer. And I would have been about 9, 10 weeks pregnant. I wasn't quite sure where I was because I hadn't had an ultrasound. I'd just gotten the pregnancy test result. And I was driving home and I saw some blood. And I just knew. There was just an awareness, and there was still this very much like push and pull, tug of war inside of my own body of whether I could surrender and let that be, or if I was going to be in deep grief and grip. And I was just kind of in the limbo state, not quite knowing where to go with it. And I just waited and I waited and I waited. And then one night, I'd called my midwife and told her what was happening. And she'd just been very honest with me and really did the work of the wise woman to say, your body is wise and there's nothing you can do about this. If you're miscarrying, there's nothing you can do. And so I went home and I kind of just sat in the stillness, sat in the quiet and in the limbo space. And that's very similar to before we birth every time, whether it's a live birth or not, where there is an anticipation and a wonder and an awe. And there's always grief in that space as well, because something is coming to an end, right? And I went to bed one night. I don't remember how far after it was that I first saw some blood. I think it was probably 4 or 5 days. I went to sleep and I woke in the middle of the night and there was a rhythmic washing over of contractions happening in my body. and I felt very feral. There was no way that I could lay still, and I didn't want to disturb anybody. I didn't feel like I wanted to be disturbed. I got up and I went to my ensuite, to the washroom, and I sat on the toilet and I contracted and labored and labored and labored. And I gripped onto the sink and I gripped onto the toilet bowl and I gripped onto my thighs and I cried. And I did all of these things that I'd actually never done with my other babies. What I realized is that in my live birth, that had been a complete submission to the process. There was something internally, there was something subconsciously that knew that there was going to be this prize at the end. And it would allow me to completely soften and open and let what wanted to come. But this was by far my longest labor. This probably spanned about 8 hours through the night. My longest live birth has been 2 hours and 50 minutes. It went all the way through the night, and it took so much for me to expel such a small little thing, such a small amount. But I know that that was a complete breaking down of myself in that process, and that I was having to work through the obstacles, through the grievances, the traumas, the pains, the lost hopes, the lost dreams. I was having to say goodbye. I was having to come to terms with the fact that ungripping, surrendering, allowing the goddess to move through me in that way was not going to come with the joy at the end of it. And so in that experience of being completely broken down to nothing, again, it was my Anana experience. But this time, instead of being broken down to the underworld, I was like experiencing a Reshtagal, who is the dark hearth, who screams and cries and wails and wants to be seen and heard in her pain. But it was me that was having to see and hear myself. I'd never experienced birth this way. I'd had the light at the end. And this time I had to kind of experience the other side. So that labor was long, and it was all by myself, and that was a chosen path. I'm always a very solitary birther, but I knew this time that I wasn't going to get the medicine that I needed unless I did this alone. And it was it's the way that I experienced my first plant medicine journey with mushrooms too, where I kind of took myself off for a few days and completely focused in and went really deep. And I knew even for that I wasn't going to access the pieces of myself, the really dark, shadowy, angry, grief-stricken pieces and places without that solitude. And so there was times in that labor where I shook the same way that I have when I've birthed my other children, but this time it felt like different emotions and different traumas and different pieces of myself were being shaken loose and integrated. And on the flip side of that, when everything was done and the blood had all come and the baby was out, the sun was rising. And somehow I still experienced that kind of blissful, ecstatic wave. Do you know at the end of the biggest cry of your life, when you feel completely emptied out and so vulnerable and raw and wide open? Well, there is sorrow in that, but there's such ecstasy in experiencing yourself at such a deep level as well. And I feel like I did so much work that night by myself that there was grief afterwards, but it was kind of delayed, some of it. And it was also not as present as I thought it would be when I'd thought about miscarriage before, because the thing had gone really dark and really deep. And I hadn't stopped it up, and I hadn't tried to clean it up or be sanitized or clinical or save face. None of it. I just completely self-witnessed. And then that morning I woke up and I went into the bedroom, told my husband that when I'd miscarried, our baby was dead. It was done. And I slept really deeply. And it just made me think of watching my grandmother the day that we buried her husband, my step-grandfather. And he was a tiny little 5'1" woman who raised 5 kids alone and was adopted at birth. She was born in a house for unwed mothers. She'd gotten a lot
of trauma in her body, but she loved this man. And the day that we buried him, she threw herself into the middle of the pews down the aisle, and she just was beating the ground. She was just so sad, and she keened. Like, she did the work of the keening grandmothers. She didn't hold it back. She was completely in her pain. And I watched the emptying out process, and I watched how sacred that is, and how that was a holy practice for the women that knew, for the wise women before, and that we've really sanitized and made that clinical, and we've prevented people from going into the depths so that they're continuously carrying the burden of grief, unseen, unknown, unfelt.
Mm.
This is why I still maintain to this day that my miscarriage, and I have had other miscarriages, but that this miscarriage was a peak experience for me. I went to the depths of my altered states, and I emptied out, and I met my dark half, and I felt completely dismantled and deconstructed, and there was death. And that's an initiation. When we experience a descent process, a breaking down, a deconstruction, and death, that is in and of itself an initiation, and initiations are peak experiences.
Mm.
They transform us. We're completely changed.
Yeah. Wow. That's a phenomenal story. As ever, I'm kind of blown away with how beautifully and poetically you share all of that, and just feel so much love and so much resonance with aspects of what you said. And so I'm kind of wondering where to start. Where I'm kind of There's so many threads I could pull right now. I'm trying to remember them all, but what stood out for me was this sense of like your courage because of what's been modeled to you about facing that and facing it as an initiation, which most of us, I think, don't have. Like that's incredible. And this piece around just what occurred to me is like how interrupted that process is, because I'm thinking about my own journey with miscarriage, and it actually, what came to me as you sharing your story was, oh, I've birthed twice, and like it's so far removed from it's just like, oh, it's a miscarriage, like we don't hold it as birth almost, or I didn't, and it just made me suddenly realize, oh, hang on, like I've got one child and I birthed her, but actually like I've birthed twice.
Yes, you really have. And it's like a lost art of holding space for miscarriage as an actual rite of passage and a key event in a woman's life. Like like every single soul that comes into our body, every other cell that enters our body, whether it be sperm or the multiplication of the cells of our babies, they leave an imprint in our bodies. We are like intermerged, our systems are merged, and they never leave us. We never leave it. It's like something that we have to integrate and process. And um, it's stigmatized and made taboo because it's really not about blood or miscarriage. It's about people not knowing the rite of passage of death anymore. Like, we don't hold the dying in the same way. We don't wash the bodies of the dying any longer. We don't keen and wail and grieve. And so we package it and put it away because people are awkward with death. So we don't know how to express our pain because we know we're not going to be held in a way that feels nourishing or real or authentic. So we're just like, oh, it's done. Like, we put it away for the sake of other people more than ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
Like when
think
I say,
that's so true. And I think the witch in particular has this sense and this fear of being too much. And I think that can show up for her in death of any kind. You know, often there's a kind of death and rebirth process in recognizing ourselves as witches, and even becoming healers and all of that sort of thing, and even just the healing journey in itself. And it's definitely something that I know comes up for listeners, is this fear of death.
for sure. But a wise woman has to know how to be present with the polarities. And if the witch inside you is awake, she knows it. Like, she's pulled to all of the aspects of magic, enchantment, like the mundane as well as the magical. Like, we know that going and taking soup to a new mother is no more important than going and making tea for the grieving widow. Like, we understand the polarities and we want to be there. And it's whether people will accept us, because we're so far and few between. The women, the witches, the people, the femme, the folk who want to go and hold space of the polarities are so far and few between that those who need them are kind of suspicious for a minute, almost as well. They're waiting for us, but they weren't expecting us. So we have to be gentle. It's not, we want people to be gentle with us and our ways and our magic and receive us, but we have to be gentle with them while they're figuring out who we are and what we offer. It's like, I was watching a video on Instagram the other day and it was so cute. It was talking about a little kitten that had been abused in a former, in the home that it was born in. And this mother cat, not its mother, but a mother cat comes into the cage where the kitten is and keeps coming. The kitten is just clawing and clawing at the cat. And the cat just keeps kind of like circling back and then finally puts the backside towards the kitten. The kitten scratches it and then the mother just sits down at the mouth of the cage. And then the kitten very slowly comes up and sidles next to the mother cat and settles in. And there it is. But it takes time. That mother cat is us as witches. We have the nourishment to bring. We have to be so gentle, and they won't always be as gentle with us.
I love it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something particularly around the kind of interruption, because there's almost like, for you, it's like it's just like it's so natural that this is just a rite of passage. And like what I'm hearing is like it is a rite of passage. It's not like we have to make it a rite of passage. It's like it is, but we don't know how to navigate as that. So I'm wondering if we start off with like what we mean by a rite of passage.
A rite of passage is, imagine a threshold in life where there's a choice point. And it doesn't really matter what the choice is. There is a choice point and you do have to make a choice, and you move over that and it transforms you fully. In the work that I do, I'm talking around the blood mysteries, and generally they are just thought the hallmarks of rites of passages. So there's the coming of age, male or female, monarchy for the female or for the woman born person, female born person. Then there is pregnancy. And we're taking the step over the edge to get into birth. There is birth, stepping over into releasing the baby. Then there's postpartum, which is the transformation of the body transforming to nourish the baby. Then there is menopause, getting into the wild woman years. And even like perimenopause as well, where there are all these choice points to start letting the mother you go and start stepping into your sensuality, and how that magic and medicine is going to bring juice to the whole community, right? But it means letting go of the preconceived ideas of sexuality and sensuality, the preconceived ideas of value of a woman in her prime, and start seeing yourself in that place. And then there's menopause itself. There's going into croning, which is a complete decision to retain your blood in order to retain your own magic and medicine, to be so full of it that you can follow the crowd with your magic and not have to lead anymore. But every time someone turns around to you, your blood is rich and you have it for them. But there again, we scrap heap the crone a lot of the time, and we have an absolute society full of unhealthy elders. Rites of passages are choice points and places where we have a choice to release the piece of us and move past it so that we can get to the next stage. Now, what I'm seeing now, like I was saying, is a society, our eldership is so imperative and important. Without healthy elders, society crumbles and crashes. We have a society of unhealthy elders who are bitter and resentful, and that is because they haven't been seen in all of the rites of passages of their lives. Think about the 70-year-old woman who's stuffed away her period, whose mother never acknowledged it, who had to clean herself far away, who had to figure out what a period was alone. Think about going through pregnancy, just kind of like chop wood, carry water, nobody talk about it, put the belly away, hide it under the pretty apron, right? Birth, don't let a man in here. This is not for men. This is dirty. Now we need to make it clinical. And then they don't, like, they're getting into their age 45 or so, into their perimenopause, menopausal, going towards that. And now they're just really there to kind of oversee the younger generation going out and doing that thing. But already by that point, they're like, where was my joy? Where was my pleasure? Where was I seen? Where was I honored? Where did I put myself first? Where was my blood made sacred? Because I'm still shedding blood for everybody and nobody's seeing me. So then by the time they get through to crone, they're just like, my life is gone and I was never seen. Maybe, and their peak experiences will be things like their wedding day, because that was the day they were seen. It was the material aspect of something. And so they will continue to try and move through the grief of rites of passages lost by dictating to the younger generations the way they should do it, which would be in alignment with either the way they did it, because now they have to really grip on tight to the narrative of their life so it wasn't a waste, or hardcore the other side where they're like directing them to do the complete opposite to what they did, but it's still not for the benefit of the person they're directing. It's still not attuned to that person. It's still everything that they lost, everything they didn't get to do. And we need the elders who can sit at the table quietly and be so grounded and solid in their skill set, in their worth and value, because they were seen through their rites, that now they have real, attuned wisdom to give. And so I go to Circle and I host menarche ceremonies or mother blessing ceremonies or closing of the bone ceremonies for new mothers. And when there are crones in the room, lots and lots of the time they're the first ones that cry. They don't think they want to be there, but then they're in tears. And they really want to be centered. They really want to sit in that circle that's not particularly for them and tell their story. And I feel for them. And still, I'm kind of like, this is a sad situation when the elder can't come and hold space because they need to be seen. Right. The passages need to be reclaimed. There's so many women that I know now that are going back to doing a menarche ceremony for themselves. And it could be so basic. It's just can be a home thing that they do all by themselves. But I think it's our work now to be in reclamation so that we can be healthy elders in a world that's transforming before our eyes and needs us.
I love that so much. And just that sense of what came to me as you were saying that is in the absence of that ancient wisdom, it's is it down to us to reclaim that?
For sure. For sure. And what we're doing is I have these 4 daughters, and don't get me wrong, they're 18, 14, nearly 30, 12, and 10. And my oldest 2, I've definitely watched them veer off the path at their own times that they've been raised in. But my 18-year-old now, she sits in a circle with me of her own volition. She picks out the medicine of her own volition. My 14-year-old is now asking to come to circle with me after really going the other way for a little while there. We embody it and we don't need to dictate to them that. And even if we really want to, which I have done, we just embody it and they follow it. And then what we're doing is, even if we're not doing it perfectly, and we can't expect them to, they're doing it earlier. There's less doing for them.
I love that.
I think we have to go back to the youth first and foremost. We're trying to change the minds of people who have been and gone. Love the boomers for their own things, but we're not, there's no point being in that realm anymore,
I love that.
We need to go to the place where the roots are coming up. The seeds are sprouting.
And this is so juicy for the Secret Witch, I think, because the Secret Witch is here for a journey of healing herself and becoming a healer. And I think for that journey, and my language around what you share is the different initiations are kind of different archetypal remedies. So Luna would be the crone, or Aurum would be stepping into our adults, and she-wolf, actually, Mama She-wolf would be the mother phase. And so I think what we're talking about is reclaiming our initiations. And I'm wondering, particularly, actually, firstly, where does miscarriage sit? Because I guess it's around the entry to motherhood. Possibly, I suppose it depends when the miscarriage happens. But what's your sense of where that sits archetypally?
When I think of archetype, that I live, work, breathe with Anna. And her archetypal journey, to really synopsis, I'm not going to tell the story, there's other places for that, but she gets the call from heaven to go to her sister in the underworld, and she has to go through 7 gates of undoing, of unrobing, dismantling all of her finery to get to the underworld, where she spends 3 days in a death process and meets her dark half, and then she rises back up. There is death and birth in that archetypal journey. There it is the absolute balance point. It's
Mm.
the two, it's the non-binariness of it and the how nature wants to work. It always wants to move into homeostasis. The human body, the universe, nature, the planet, everything has an implanted, ingrained need and ability to come to homeostasis. And this archetypal journey is the rite of passage of birth and death. It's amalgamated. And so that's why it's so rich, because there is always a death process in birth. Don't get me wrong, it's an internal,
Yeah,
it's a spiritual
that
one.
stood out to me as you said that as well, actually. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit more, because that makes so much sense.
Well, there's a spiritual death process. Like everybody goes through their own griefs, whether it's when we get to the end of pregnancy and we start to descend into the deepest altered states of consciousness so that we can access our intelligence and we can let our body, our mind, our spirit, our baby all do its work, and our actual constellation around us. Everybody gets brought into that altered state when it's done well, and everybody's kind of like reorganizing the way things are going to be, and the baby is reorganizing its position, and then the organs, everything is doing its work, the hormones. In that time of going deeper down, there is anticipation and there's grief that oftentimes comes up, and it can look a lot like in our culture, like franticness and urgency, that late nesting stage, and they're like, I need to get this done, I need to get that done, I can't be in with these people, I'm getting kind of irritable. That irritation is just a byproduct of us not being able to be fully in the feeling of grief and anticipation. So we're kind of trying to scramble out of it and get away from that feeling. But the sorrow is that life is going to change and we don't know what it looks like on the other side. So there's grief already for what it was, because we don't know what the pleasure will or will not look like. So we're just in the grief of what's been. It's like if you've ever lost a good friendship or a relationship or a job, or you've moved home, you know you're going to do it. You know there's going to be something juicy at the other side, but you're only in the loss right now. And so this is a spiritual death that's happening inside. The cross-culturally ancient practice, everything knows that there is a death process happening when you birth anything, that something has to go first, right? Many cultures will say that there has to be a loss of a family member before a baby will come in. It's the same kind of idea. But in miscarriage, this physicality, you are literally carrying life and death. You are going to have to you're going to have to birth death. And so this is a very visceral experience of being like the dark and the light, like the Sophia and the Black Madonna, like everything is in you all at once in a very physical, palpable way. And it's a lot for the human to kind of alchemize, but we do. And it's the peak experience of that for me is that I now know the breadth of what I can personally do. And I don't want to presume to go to anybody with sympathy when they've miscarried, the same way that I don't want to presume to go to them with joy when they tell me they're pregnant. We do not know what the experience is for that person in that moment, but it's alchemy.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And it's interesting because my natural response, to somebody sharing a story like you shared would normally be like, oh, I'm so sorry to know that you went through that. But I could just feel like that necessarily wasn't it was and it wasn't your experience, if that makes sense. And I guess there's still like a part it's good to and helpful to acknowledge that. And it's almost like an I'm okay with this experience. Like it was a peak experience, right?
It took me a long time to alchemize. So I will say I went through that experience and felt cleared out the next morning, felt accomplished, and I was raw still. And what I went and did, so this was a point in my life where I was definitely on a path. I was definitely on my path, but I was still carrying a lot of my maiden, and I was still in pain about quite a bit. And I was lonely. I was only a year into being in this country from England to Canada. And I went to my friend that maybe the night after and sank a bottle of wine. Didn't want to talk about miscarriage, babies, anything. I wanted to dissociate, and I did. And I really put it away. I put it into a box or on a hook for a long time and thought that I dealt with it. I wasn't experiencing a lot of pain or grief. And actually, maybe that's because I got pregnant 2 months later, had a very fast miscarriage around 6 weeks, and felt nothing. Was just like, and that tells me that I was dissociated still. That I was just like, I'm not quite here. I'm not going to pain about this because I'm not quite in my body. And then I got pregnant 2 months later, consciously, and I knew the night that I got pregnant that Ivy was going to stick around, and I knew that she wasn't the baby that I'd wanted to come through before either. I knew she was a completely different soul and entity. But it wasn't until a couple of years later, I want to say like 3 years later, maybe, I think Hazel, my fourth, was already born, and I opened like a memory box up, and a card was in there from my grandma saying, Sean was so sorry to hear about the baby. And the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
It was so many years after that we have to like honor as well that there is a time and a place for this, that we have to have the capacity to be able to go into it fully. I went fully into the physical experience and did that part, but there was all of this. There was a maturing that I had to do. There was a restabilizing. I had to feel safe in my system, in my constellation. And we know this from a psychological point of view because so many people put traumas into a box away and then something triggers it, right? Anything could trigger it. And there we are. And we don't want it, but there is a trust in the process that things are in order, that the structure is in place for us to go into that. So when I speak to this, I don't want anybody to ever perceive that I had this all like kicked off and that I did it in perfect order. I just dealt with the depth of the specific things that I could at specific times. But when it came up, I was like, okay, now it's time. Now here we are. Now the goddess is giving me this, and there is no going back because she's given it to me. So there is no going back.
Yeah, I love that. There's a very human, I mean, you're totally human, but like there's a very human kind of bringing home of like how it took you, how long it took to kind of process that as well. And providing hope that even if women have kind of feel like they've lost their chance at that initiation, because there's almost a sense of we could be listening feeling like, oh well, that wasn't my experience, so like have I missed that rite of passage? And I'm wondering if you can speak to that and like the ways that we can start to see, hear, witness, acknowledge ourselves in that experience.
Ceremony and ritual is the act of moving through a rite of passage in an embodied way. It puts thought and form together, and alchemy can happen that way. And everything what we do in our witch work really is to do with alchemy. It's about experiencing this, transforming it to this, right? And I have created ceremonies for those who have lost babies, who have miscarried before. Things like creating little boxes that they can bury of their things, and closing the bones of a woman, which is like an old ancient practice. So it's like a physical, spiritual, psychosomatic kind of practice of tying up all of the energy centers, rocking the hips, bringing warmth back into the body, having prayer put over the mother. There's many different things we can do in the course of that. Ritual is a solo practice, ceremony is a community practice, either or, both even. But speaking to your experience, like birth storytelling is one of the most lightening. It lightens us. It allows us to be completely flushed out of all of the experience, and then we can read it to others, we can share it with others, or we can keep it to ourselves, we can burn it, we can bury it, let the earth take it over, let her be with us in that, let ourselves be rocked by the great mother. I think it's when things are locked deep inside of us and then not given back to her that becomes like a really deep wound that can fester and actually spill out into the rest of our life and into the people around us. So it's almost like a radical, responsible thing to do as a wise woman, to share your stories when you feel ready. And if you're not ready to share them with others, and share them with yourselves. Let yourself be heard to yourself in your pain, in your grief, in your pleasure, if that was there. Because honestly, like whether it's me birthing my live children or birthing children that were not alive, I have not always felt like there's space for me to talk about the pleasure and accomplishment in those things, because so many people are triggered. You still have to create space for yourself.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, there's something about the storytelling piece that really stood out to me. And I think we were talking before about how, when we share our wounds, there's a remedy. Everybody has their own kind of unique remedy. And so I can really feel what you're sharing there about like sharing our stories, first and foremost for ourselves. Like you say, it's like there's so much healing in learning to hear and see ourselves. I know from my own journey as well, that's been huge. As a witch who learned to kind of mask herself as well, like there's a starting to see ourselves is like so transformative, but also like healing for others that's accessible within. And that's not why we do it, but like it's kind of like a byproduct is we share that raw truth, just as you're doing. This is a remedy for others, for those who need it. It just feels so important.
I think we're at a time on the planet now. I've always been very solo witch, solo birth worker. I've on purpose, really, because I just couldn't deal with the noise and feeling quite black sheeped and quite radical compared to a lot of other people. So I've just been solo, but things are changing and I'm opening. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere without collaboration and collective care and a return to community in the broadest sense. Like there is space at my table for people that I don't necessarily like, but who I have a shared value and cause with. And it's fine. I think it's good and okay for us to tell our story with the intention of it being healing for others as well, with the intention of it being healing, for us to know that even if we're not on the same page about everything, even if our personalities don't meld perfectly, there is room for this collaborative experience of us healing together for group wounds that are going to allow us to go out into the community and do work well. And be service orientated as witches, as wise women, as femmes, as healers, all of the things that we used to get burned for. And we have a wound there because we used to turn on one another as witches. We used to give each other's names over. So we have reclamation work to do even there, to be like, well, you're a bit of trouble, or we don't really see eye to eye on all of this thing, but we can see each other in one another. In this story, we can really relate to one another. So let us heal together and see what that heals intergenerationally, ancestrally.
I love that. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking about the sister wound this morning and how that was very much part of the witch wound. So I love that that's now synchronistically right into our conversation. There was something that came up around like miscarriage is a taboo topic, around the kind of shame and blame that we can kind of, our culture can kind of associate with miscarriage. And I'm just wondering if we can speak to that, because I have a sense that sharing our story might bring up that fear.
Yeah. Well, we live in like a society and a Western culture now where we sue everybody for everything, right? Like free birth attendants and those of us who are really dedicated to sovereign birth have this fear that you're going to get sued, that you're going to get into trouble because we're holding space for transformative rites that are really not in the hands of anything clinical the way they want us to think. We now know that the majority of maternal and fetal mortality occurs through the hospital system, through negligence, through inappropriate uses of interventions. And so we've made everything clinical, but we've also made the clinicians the saviors. And so when we experience something like miscarriage, which is oftentimes unavoidable, which is really unavoidable for the most part, unless you're in a car accident, in which case there's still an aspect of karma and unavoidability. Because it's unavoidable, we're kind of clambering and scrambling to make sure that we're not in trouble or that somebody doesn't blame us for our wrongdoing, when in actual fact, it's just the natural course of nature. And so there's this taboo, I think it's based a lot on like, who's going to point the finger? Did we do enough? Did we get help fast enough? And then we have to do all of the unraveling work of actually realizing that nobody could have done anything about that anyway. But there's so much guilt wrapped up in it because we're constantly trying to play God and avoid the inevitable, which is death. It is inevitable. Every time that I tend to birth, as morbid as this sounds, and I have I'm a home birth doula, and I see birth normal for the most part, right? There is still this thing in the back of my mind that I'm like, death lives here too, and it does, and we have to be honest about that. It does not work to keep trying to like shove that idea down. when to expose it really lessens its power
Mm.
on it. So yeah, miscarriage is taboo also because it comes with blood, and everything that is to do with blood with the female form has been compartmentalized and asked to be kind of kept and whitewashed somewhere over there. So the taboo around miscarriage is multiple. There's the blood for a kickoff. There's the idea that we didn't turn to the savior fast enough. God the Father, the patriarchy, you know? And the fact that we can't tell the hard stories because people haven't learned how to deal with their wounds and triggers enough to hold space for the stories being told. So the person who needs to be telling the story in a place of grief to move through that, for it not to be a taboo, cannot, because other people can't hold it. And the people who can't hold it are spinning out. Either they're pregnant and think it's going to happen to them, but we need to really understand that one person's experience is not another person's reality. You know, there's just like there's a decision being made somewhere, even if it's subconsciously, to avoid triggers everywhere. And the taboo is wrapped up in all of that.
I love that. Yeah, it comes back to that fear of death and how to interact with it, I suppose, as well. Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking from my own experience, there was just a sense of like, oh, don't tell anyone. Like, we're told to keep it secret, aren't we, until like 12 weeks or whatever, just make sure it's safe and we haven't got it wrong. And I just remember feeling so much rage about that as well. I wonder if you can talk to rage.
Well, yeah, because that's a silencing that's happened. And we're most angry when we've silenced ourselves, I think, because we know that was a big dishonor to our own needs and who we are as women. And so when we quieten ourselves on anything that we knew we shouldn't have been quiet about, I think we have a very stern self-resentment. And then that turns, when we go deeper into that, we start looking at what it is in society that's made us adhere to self-silencing, knowing that it's completely wrong to do that. And then it just makes us angry about the state of the world and how unheld we are in our wildness, in our rawness, you know? And I also followed that kind of rule before of waiting till 12 weeks. And I think a lot of that also, if I'm honest with myself, came down to the idea of failure and not wanting to be seen as being able to not wanting to be seen as a failure and being able to carry a pregnancy all the way through to the end. But I want to look at the pride that we can feel as well. The fact that it is such an initiation that not everybody can do fully consciously move through birthing death like that and it's just like the human being who has a near-death experience and moves into the realm of shamanism because they experience near-death. The majority of shamanic wise people are those who have experienced a real close call with death. They proved something to the goddess and the universe and themselves about their sustainability, their resourcefulness, their resilience, their ability to look dark, hard things in the eyes. And so as the years went on, I kind of look back on my time as seeing my miscarriages as a failure as like just a basic human ego trait of perfectionism and wanting to be good at everything. And then realized that, holy shit, the thing that I was really good at was absolutely incredible. You know, it's always going to feel good to birth a baby at the end and everybody be like, look what you did. But knowing I had this like nugget of gold inside of me, like, oh, I did this though. And it doesn't matter what your miscarriage looks like. It doesn't matter if you resisted it all the way, if you had a D&C, it doesn't matter what that looked like. You did it. You accomplished that. You came through to the other side. And that is a perspective that is rich and juicy. And that sometimes I think it takes getting into your 40s to really understand the juice of the dark.
I love that so much. Yeah. Because and there's something around like that initiation being almost the call often into being a healer as well is often I think secret witches will experience like the call to the witch as some kind of initiation, some kind of darkness or death is almost like how she calls us. So we often don't think that that's how it's going to be. Like we think that being a witch is all magic and like roses and chocolates and
yeah,
and it's very very usually not. Yeah, there was something there around my own experience that came up, and I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was just that piece about rage. That because there was someone else going through giving birth around the same time that I had a miscarriage. I just remember feeling the rage because it's like people were celebrating and honoring that rite of passage, but not like dismissing my. So, oh well, you can try again. You can have a, and then there's something in that that feels very much tied into what we were just talking about as well.
Yeah.
That
There is an
sense of
injustice. There is an injustice in this absolute incessant need to only celebrate and seek out the light because it's palatable and comfortable and people know what to do with that. So I guess this is honestly why a lot of people, like in my mind, turn to, I think that your whatever faith and creed feels right for you is the right one for you. But I think that people are missing out on an experience when they just want to keep handing their power over to this savior, to this light-filled area, and like denigrating the darkness because it's dissociative. To me, it's dissociative. And you feel anger when you're like, do you see what's going on here? Do you see how this transforms me? Do you see how kind of reckless it is to not try and integrate all of the pieces? And I think there are very human archetypal emotions of jealousy included in that. We can't turn our back on that. Jealousy is part of the dark mother and she exists and she's rich. Jealousy shows us what it is that we need more of in our life. And if we're feeling jealous because somebody is being celebrated, it's because we need more of the celebration. It's very basic. We're allowed to feel that because that's unjust. And the witch looks for justice. She wants to right the wrongs and she always is looking to create homeostasis. She wants balance again. Witches work with the earth because the earth returns to balance. It does everything that it needs to, regardless of what it destructs in its path, in order to return to homeostasis. Mother Earth does not care less about what it takes down in a forest fire if it's going to clear out a forest disease and make room for the new growth.
Ooh, I love that. I love that about the witch being here for justice. Like that makes so much sense. But I've never named it that way before or heard it named that way before.
I think there's an activist in pretty much every witch. And I think as we age, the activism inside of us simmers. We've got this burning mother fire inside of us in the summer full moon of our lives, in the mother earth. And then she simmers down to this like Sagittarius candle glow, where now we're truth seeking. So think about the Leo summer of the mother, where she fire and rage and burn and like ravages and is passionate. And it's beautiful. She does work there. But then we move into the like autumn, the Sagittarius of the fire, and that is candle glow and now truth seeking and exploration of the truth. So our activism remains, but now it's more like, oh, we're going to be the aunties, we're going to be the wild women around the campfire who come into council to have the necessary conversations without shouting.
I love that. Yeah, I've been journeying with this with some clients actually at the moment, and the remedy that comes to mind is causticum. I don't know if you know causticum, but there's that kind of real justice piece. It feels like the overall kind of remedy of alchemy, and it's been very present with everything that's going on, particularly in the US as well at the moment. It's been a remedy that I've really felt collectively. So I love that you've just named that because it's just like, yeah, just a real nugget about the witch and how she how she works with that remedy. I love that.
I love these remedies that are coming up. I'm taking note.
Yeah, and of course, like she-wolf and that kind of wildness from love that feels like Mama She-wolf. In fact, actually, that could be your remedy because it's very much like the wild mother archetype, and it's one of the remedies actually made from mother's milk, so a wolf milk. So that actually, that really resonates with your remedy. I love that. I knew we'd get to it. I said before, didn't I? I was like, I wonder really like what's your remedy? It's one of the matrodonals. From the book.
Perfect.
Yeah. So let me feel into where to come back to. I think there's the piece about dissociation and how we can kind of come out of that or like bring ourselves back down into that. In essence, there's almost like something around the body, the womb. Like, is there anything around that to speak to?
Sure, there is. When we've been deconstructed, we always need to tend to the root first. So the root, the dark ruby red root, wants physical touch, wants finances to feel covered, wants the body to feel healthy and stable. And so bringing herbs into the body, like we have to treat the body post miscarriage the same as we would treat the body post birth in any realm. Okay, so we need to rewarm the body. Ayurvedic, TCM, Mayan, some of the most old and indigenous midwifery practices are to rewarm the body after birth. I never give women unless she has a placenta smoothie immediately after birth, I never give her anything cold post-birth. There are broths and soups and stocks, stews, warm teas, raspberry leaves, nettle to replenish the blood in the body, oat straw to bring the nervous system back into equilibrium, linden for the heart, rose hips for immunity, red clover when we want to start to return to fertility and revitalize the womb. Honey, mothers need some sweetness. We need easily and accessible sugar, and we need the mother honey. We need sweetness again. Bone marrow, things that stick to you, collagen, beef liver, mindfully bringing herbs and the plants, and for me and most people that I serve at this point, animal back into the body helps us to put our fur back on. I don't know if you've ever heard of the myth of the chival. I would tell you a story right now, a myth about Madwoman Mish, but I'm not going to because it's long. And this is a very appropriate myth for anybody that's experienced grief, loss, death, and a rewilding in the process. And you can find that myth in the book Women, If Women Rose Rooted by Siân Marie. And if you are on the path of looking at archetypes and indigenous Celtic roots, especially as well, this is a book that cannot be missed. It speaks so much to it. But we need to put the fur back on our bodies. We need to, we're honoring our grief. We're being the wolf. We're primitive and we're prowling and we're looking for where to nest, where we're safe. Our ears are pricked up still. Our senses are highly attuned. Our senses are sensitive. Actually, it can be a sensory overload. Keep the body warm, wrap up, keep the head warm, have socks on, castor oil packs on the womb, yoni steams, bringing herbs into the body, especially, I like rosemary, a little bit of mugwort, some raspberry.
How funny. I'm drinking mugwort. I literally felt cool to have mugwort tea before.
There you go. She's a witch's herb.
Yeah.
And she's very powerful, so you don't use a lot internally, but mugwort helps to clear out the womb. So you can take it by tincture or tea form, and it helps to clear the womb out, and you can steam with that, and it's going to do the same thing. It's also connected you to your inner witch. She is the witch's herb. We want to bring love back in there. We're bringing rose and lavender and maybe some red clover in there if you wanted to, but rosemary is protective and it's cleansing. We don't really stillbirth. If there is stillbirth that's occurred and the baby is larger, sometimes there can be perineal tears or some tissue repair that needs to be done. And if that's occurring, then we're using something like calendula in that steam as well, or comfrey. But we don't necessarily need that if we've miscarried and there hasn't been any trauma to the tissues or the perineum. But what we do have the privilege of oftentimes in miscarriage and stillbirth, I mean, if we have other children, it can be a bit more difficult, but we're not tending to a fresh baby. So in that postpartum portal of time, the first couple of weeks, especially the first 3 weeks, especially, we do actually have a little bit more opportunity to turn inwards and to go into the depths of our own actual physical body healing too. So I recommend that a lot. Cabbage leaves for the breasts if we're not going to pump to donate the milk. Sometimes that can feel like a really freeing and liberating experience to pump and be able to donate. But if that feels too tender, cabbage leaves and sage tea can help to dry up any milk that wants to come. I'm sure that for me, it's normally Ignatia that I would
Yeah.
offer women
Yes.
homeopathically. And
That's
motherwort,
kind
right?
of the maiden is the energy of Ignatia and grief as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ignatia just really unlocks on so many levels.
Yeah.
So I would normally give Ignatia, and you can speak to maybe the homeopathics that you would use. But for me, it's Ignatia and then some chamomilla as well. And motherwort tincture is what I give for the heart, as that's grieving herbally as well. And maybe some valerian to help sleep also. There might be flower essences that if you like homeopathy, I think you oftentimes like flower remedies. I think they just work so complementary together on such a subtle vibrational level, and then they don't put you into a healing crisis. You know, so gather your things, make a little list. And if you're not using it because you're having a miscarriage or experiencing it, then you're the wise woman who knows what to take to somebody else or to offer to another person. Yeah, there is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual work. There's dream work that probably is going to come up there. And also, so that can all help with the dissociative space, but also really honor that if there is nothing that's wanting to bring you down into your body right now, that physical touch just might be all that you're going to ask for from somebody around you. Maybe you're just not quite ready. And that's okay too. But we are starved of touch that doesn't have to be reciprocated. Even a weighted blanket can feel good after that to press down onto the body, and oxytocin, anything that facilitates the womb returning to its pre-pregnancy state via the hormone oxytocin. And oxytocin is going to help you to feel the energetic support that you need of love, just love.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. There's so many gems in that. Feels like a little treasure trove of an apothecary that you've just offered. Yeah, beautiful. I think the only other thing that I'm not sure if we've spoken to already is this sense of often women will feel broken in miscarriage, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah. I mean, you are. I think we just have to honor that there was a severing that occurred there, that there was a submission to the severance of you from all of the dreams and hopes that you'd had, from the soul that was coming through that decided not to come in a body. Yeah, the severance is real, and that does come with broken pieces. And to be broken does not mean that it's over, that you're done, that you're dead. It means that there has been a fracture, and the soul can split off. We can have soul pieces that want to fly away, and that's part of dissociation, right? And it can take a while to call it back. So I think just calling it what it is and saying that, yes, you're broken and all is not lost. You haven't died, that this will come back, that there are steps for yourself, emotions to go through. And don't try to be anything other than broken right now. And the connotation with the word broken needs to be reevaluated. Because, there's that ancient art, I think it's a Japanese art, of putting back a shattered vase with golden paint. And I think that we come into this world pretty clear with lots of soul memories and ideas and dharma and karma. But essentially, we're here on a clear path. And the point of us is that we die with wisdom gained through grief. Like grief and loss is the price we pay for wisdom.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's a really potent quote. I love that so much. Yeah.
I think that actually isn't from me, that I heard that spoken by Saran Bertrand, who wrote, there's the Magdalene book they wrote, and there's also the Womb Awakening book that they wrote. And I heard her speak at some point. I don't remember when, but I'm sure that that's where I heard that. And it settled into my bones too.
Yeah, that's really gorgeous. Yeah. Wow. I would love to know, as we kind of come to a close, if there's one thing that you wish women would know about navigating miscarriage, what would it be? You may well have already covered it. It might be something new.
No, it's the same as what I would recommend for birth. I mean, when you are at the edge of birthing, no matter what kind, it's going to feel very stretchy and uncomfortable, and like you want to rush past the portal of waiting, the patient portal, that you want to instigate something or you want to get something over and done with. And the majority of the wisdom and intelligence and perspective that we glean is in that portal of time where you're sitting in the stillness, waiting and sitting with the whole plethora of feelings that you have. So I don't recommend going for ultrasounds. If you see that your baby is dead, it's not going to change. If you see that your baby has a heartbeat right now, but you feel that this blood that keeps coming is going to change that, it's not going to change the outcome. So I recommend keeping this process as undisturbed as possible. There are a couple of podcasts, and I don't remember the title, so I'll let you know, and you can put them in show notes maybe. But there are a couple of really incredible podcast episodes by very wise women who hold space for home miscarriage, and they give you practical tools, what herbs to gather, what to do in that case. It doesn't mean that it's easy, the same as herbal abortion. I definitely don't think this is the easy route. It's going to take a lot of diligence sometimes, but sitting patiently and gathering your tools, whether that's a doula in a friend form or whatever, or the things that you need for a yoni steam, just deeply tending to yourself and being still and remembering that there is a blueprint for birth. And that occurs in miscarriage too. So we're very oftentimes feeling rushed to go and get the necessary tests or interventions to expedite the process, when we can be still and quiet and wait and be patient. And oftentimes it will complete itself. And we don't have to then undo the trauma have been interfered with too. Birth in all aspects.
Yeah, I love that because, of course, anything else is kind of suppressing what's natural and yeah. Gorgeous. Thank you so much. I would love for you to share more about what you're working on, how people can find you, or anything that wants to be shared in completion.
Sure. So I am taking birth clients, as always, in the central Alberta region of Canada, which is Calgary and surrounding areas. I feel very lucky now that my demographic of people call for me to come to their birth, really just do want the quintessential wise woman. Now I feel very aligned. It's exciting. So anybody who's looking to really reclaim the rite of passage of birth, I am available for. I also offer distance or remote childbirth preparation and postpartum preparation classes. I'll offer those via Zoom internationally. I'm currently mentoring a group of women in my motherarchy mentorship, which is a birth work mentorship, but it really is about learning how to hold space for all the peak experiences: pregnancy, birth, postpartum, menopause, death. That's a year-long endeavor. We will wrap up in September, and then I'll be doing intake for the next group, the next cohort of that. But I do mentor people one-on-one in all the realms: birth work, and again, just about personal transformation, witch work, life midwifery, I suppose. And I can feel all of this amalgamating now into a desire and just the very organic creation of collective work. So I think what's coming for me next is getting word out there and starting to come together with different practitioners who want to serve the community from all of these different legs of skill set. So I will say to any listeners, any of the secret witches, that if you're looking for any kind of support or practitioner help, in any realm really, that you can reach out to me, and the likelihood that I will have somebody, a resource that can kind of assist you even long distance, is quite high. So I'm just kind of enjoying the idea of being a speaker and a bit of a hub right now. You
I
can
love that.
find me on you can find me on Instagram at Motherarchy, MOTHERARCHY. And I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to engage. I'm extremely Gemini all over, and so I like to talk. And I'm really about building community and being part of a wider web now. So I would love to hear from anybody.
I love that so much, and also highly recommend following you in all the places to like share your gorgeous poetic writing as well.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah. So thank you so much, Sean. It's been absolutely gorgeous to just dive into that topic. Yeah, I think it's going to be so healing for so many. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me back again. Thank you.
What a tender episode with the gorgeous Siân. Here are my takeaways. Miscarriage is over-sanitized in our patriarchal culture, which has it commonly not seen as the significant peak experience and transformative rite of passage that it can actually be, similar to live childbirth and other life transitions. Miscarriage can be a deeply emotional and spiritual journey where we learn how to meet ourselves, face and process intense emotions, including grief and loss, and even pleasure, yet it is also often seen as taboo and shameful. Left alone, and if we can allow ourselves to sit patiently whilst allowing everything to move through us, the body has a natural wisdom in how to process miscarriage, and we can attune to our bodies to navigate this. We are broken in the process. We are giving birth to death, and often it is also the path to reclaiming our deep wisdom. If we've ever had an over-clinicalised miscarriage, we can still journey with reclaiming this rite of passage, this threshold, through ritual and ceremony, reclaiming parts of ourselves that have felt lost to this process. Telling our story and being seen and held in sisterhood is a deeply crucial step in our healing journey for personal closure. Sharing it with others also offers a remedy for them too. We are remedies for those like us.